about is quite close to my heart, and that's Godzilla. I love Godzilla. Godzilla is one of my favorite films, particularly the Toho Godzillas, the Japanese Godzillas. Even the Heisei era is very good. The Hollywood made Godzillas, not so much. But Toho, the current production studio behind Godzilla, has announced some rules for Godzilla movies moving forward. Now, before we dive into the article, I do need to go over my history with Godzilla. As I just said, I really like it. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah is my favorite movie from the Japanese versions of the film. Godzilla Final Wars is also a huge amount of fun, just watching Godzilla take on every monster in his rogues gallery, so to speak. And Godzilla Minus One was a masterpiece. I loved Godzilla Minus One. The Hollywood-made Godzillas, I care very little about. The one with Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver was okay. It was fine. The human element took far too much front stage, and it was very, very dull because of it. But when Godzilla actually showed up, that's when it got really exciting. When the scene where he walks onto the tarmac at the airport was fantastic, or when he finally uses his atomic breath. Amazing. But Godzilla vs. King of the Monsters was okay. It was only really good because of the King Ghidorah fight. King Kong, I care very little about. So Godzilla vs. King Kong, I cared even less about. And the last movie, Godzilla New Empire, I barely registered on my radar. Godzilla Minus One was fantastic. It brought the human element front and center again, but you actually cared about the characters, particularly the way it handled PTSD was very raw and very real, and Godzilla was just terrifying, like actually scary. It was good to see. It was like, man, this is what it would feel like if Godzilla was chasing after me in a boat. I would be shitting myself. All of that said, Minus One was made on a budget of about 10% of the Hollywood-made ones, and it looked better than half the Marvel movies we've got in the past 5 years. So when I read that Toho has set new rules for future Godzilla movies, and I read what they wanted, I'm a little concerned. So let's start off. Here's the article here. Now, obviously, Toho are the production company behind Godzilla and owner of the titular kaiju. Now, what they've said is that Godzilla cannot die, which is fine, fair enough. I don't want Godzilla to die. I want a lot of more movies in the style of Minus One in the future, but he's not to prey on people or things. I don't know what they mean by things. So what are things? Things are very vague. That could be a building, that could be another kaiju, that could be a dog. I don't know what they mean by things. People I can understand. So they don't want Godzilla to prey on people. Now, using Minus One as a reference, he doesn't necessarily prey on people. He goes after sort of Japan, as Godzilla is an allegory for war, and particularly the nuclear bombs that dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But what I don't understand is prey on people. It kind of sounds like even if people are collateral damage, it just can't happen. And then we get into the weird sort of Hollywood ones where entire cities are evacuated in an instant. And it's unrealistic, which is really weird to say when we're talking about Godzilla. In the New Empire, Rio de Janeiro is evacuated in what seems like hours. That's 6.8 million people evacuated in an instant. It's unrealistic. In Minus One, a lot of people die. Like, you see people dying, and it really hammered home the threat that Godzilla poses. But we'll go through the article, keep going down. Who knows what this actually means? So in this section here, they really are just going over the history of Godzilla, obviously being an allegory for war. The franchise has obviously been defined by various eras. It began with the Showa era, which was followed by the Heisei era, and that largely defined the more fantastical elements of the series. So the Heisei era, wherever you see the memes of Godzilla, either football, kicking a monster, or running and jumping and things like that, that's the Heisei era. They made it, I wouldn't say goofy. Goofy is the wrong word to use. Fun, I guess. Whimsical might be another, which is really weird to say for Godzilla, but it certainly wasn't childish. It was still Godzilla took on a kaiju, and it was done in just sort of a fun little way. After all, it was a person in a suit. Now, the article continues that in recent years, we've got two very distinct Godzilla breeds. We've got the Western Godzilla, and you now have the Japanese Godzilla. Now, the Western Godzilla, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing more than just a cartoon. You just take a monster of the week and you bash them together, and it's just a bunch of noise with humans that I care so little about. It's not funny. So, and even the people that are in these movies, the story they give them is what lets them down. I haven't seen Godzilla New Empire, so take this with a grain of salt. But I do listen to the Angry Joe show and their movie reviews and video games. And there's a human in this, a human character who is a blogger or TikToker or whatever the case may be. And he's trying to prove that these kaijus are real. Meanwhile, we've had three movies where entire cities have been decimated by giant monsters. So I don't understand why that is. What's important for Godzilla Minus One, though, is that in Japan, although it was very successful in North America, hopefully it was successful in Australia, but in Japan, it was less successful as it copped a lot of criticism for its depiction of the Jinyoistic era it's set in. So a lot of people took umbrage with how it portrayed that particular era. Unfortunately, for also Godzilla Minus One's fans, is that Godzilla A New Empire made $570 million worldwide, which is the highest grossing MonsterVerse movie to date. That's a shame. Now, Godzilla Minus One does have a sequel in the works. No monsters have been teased, as in who Godzilla is going up against, because spoiler, in Minus One, he does survive at the very end. You do see his cells reproducing, the G cells, they're reanimating. Rumor has it might be Mothra or King Ghidorah. Might be a bit strange to bust out King Ghidorah at this stage. It certainly won't be Mechagodzilla, particularly if it takes place not too long after Minus One. But I'm more excited for movies like Minus One to come out, not just because of Godzilla, but the fact that it had such a small budget and it looked better, it was written better, directed better than half the big budget Hollywood movies we've had out in recent history. Just before we finish up, I thought it'd be really interesting to go onto Rotten Tomatoes and just have a look what people thought. So Godzilla Minus One, 98% critic score, 98% audience score. So pretty good. Definitely my favorite movie of last year, where Godzilla A New Empire, 54% critics, 91 audience. So pretty close with the audience score. Critics obviously didn't like it. I mean, when you see Godzilla running like a fucking T-Rex, my brain switches off. That's the end of it. I'm done. I don't care anymore. I don't want to see a movie. I am completely checked out. The just massive amounts of destruction and how people seem absolutely nonchalant about living in big cities anymore. I would be absolutely terrified that a giant kangaroo is going to come and knock down Brisbane at any moment if that was the case. So here's hoping that Toho's news about essentially nerfing Godzilla, as far as I'm concerned, isn't going to affect future Japanese-made Godzilla movies that aim to be in the style of Godzilla Minus One.